progressives and Democrats always have better policies for middle-class America and the poor. Always. And the reason why, it's a philosophical difference as far as how one improves themselves, etc. One is based on, if you're lucky, all is fine, or if others deemed you okay, qualified, it's fine for you to make, it's fine for you to ascend. But most or several of centrist Democrats going on television, they are a poor excuse for making the case for a self-sufficient middle class and poor person getting ahead. Better policies, but I mean the Republicans run rings around them in lying, in misinforming, in misconstruing. I want you to see this interview, or it's actually an interview on CNN. Both Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham are there. And Lindsey Graham is so well prepared for a Democrat who has no way of explaining himself in a manner that punches back, in a manner that everyone sees the truth. Check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side. This is simply upsetting, at the same time fascinating. Check this out.
3 independent economic analyses, including the Congressional Budget Office, all say the Inflation Reduction Act will actually have little to no impact on inflation. How is this bill actually going to help Americans who are having trouble paying for their groceries, for their housing, for their gas?
Great question, and thanks for having us in this bipartisan way. I think Americans are going to see the costs of their prescription drugs cut because of Medicare negotiations. They're going to see energy costs cut because they're going to be receiving credits and rebates for energy saving and cost cutting measures. And they're going to see greater tax fairness because corporations that are currently paying nothing will have to pay at least 15%. We're talking corporations with assets of more than $1 billion or earnings of excess in that amount. So we're going to see costs of gasoline continue to drop, costs of necessities to decline, and I think Americans will see historic results.
Well, this is not the bipartisan part of the interview. So the American Rescue Plan, remember that one? That was supposed to make everything better. Well, it became a recession plan. This is going to make everything worse. I voted for a bipartisan infrastructure bill. I voted for gun legislation. I'm not going to vote for this. The minimum tax of 15% destroys expensing. Now, what does that mean? If a company buys a piece of equipment, they could expense it under the 2017 tax cut in the same year they bought it. That goes away. So CBO says it disincentivizes companies for building factories, buying equipment, which would help us get out of recession. There's a 16.4% tax on imported barrels of oil that are going to increase cost at the gas pump. Subsidies for Obamacare go to families making $304,000 a year, which I think is ill-conceived. And the bottom line, it's not going to help inflation. It's going to make everything worse.
One of the other things that the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, said, Senator Graham, is that the bill would reduce the deficit. Republicans historically have been very focused on reducing the deficit. So why not support that?
It says it would reduce the deficit by $100 billion. We're going to spend almost $1 trillion. The truth is that the Obamacare subsidies go away after 3 years. Well, we all know they're not going to go away. So if they stayed in place for 10 years, it would add $280 billion to the deficit. So it's a gimmick. They've got a gimmick in the bill to limit the subsidies for 3 years that go to people who make $304,000 a year. This thing's going to make everything worse, and not one Republican is going to vote for it.
Well, I'll tell you one thing where I think we can agree it will make things better is the IRS is going to have resources it needs to go after the highest income Americans that are cheating on their taxes right now. And it will mean more revenue for the government. And frankly, cutting through all of the numbers, all of the CBO stuff, the average American sitting at their kitchen table deciding whether they can buy medicine, pay their mortgage, or go to the grocery store and get the food they need, they're going to be able to get that medicine much more cheaply. And overwhelmingly, American people want to cut the cost of prescription drugs. This measure does it through enabling Medicare to do what the VA does, what the Department of Defense does, negotiate for lower prices. And that will affect the entire course of inflation.
And I just want to bring one other issue that's in this bill.
And I don't agree with that. But
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, number one, prescription drugs. This is price fixing. They take 15 drugs and they put a limit on what you can charge. That sounds good until pharmaceutical companies invent less new drugs. Remember COVID? Well, it was the American pharmaceutical industry that got us the drugs that keep us out of the hospital and keep a lot of us alive. This is price fixing. It's never worked before. It's not going to work now. Hiring 86,000 more IRS agents, if that makes you feel better, you missed a lot. They're coming after waitresses, Uber drivers, and everybody else to collect more taxes. So if you think growing the IRS is good for you, you're wrong.
Do you want to respond or you want to move on?
I think the IRS is going to target the highest income Americans. As the saying goes, that's where the money is. That's where they're going to look to collect. The idea that there's going to be this army of IRS agents descending on the average American is just preposterous. Tax fairness is what we need. And for the biggest corporation in this country to pay no taxes, for them to do stock buybacks that benefit the shareholders. But for example, in the case of oil companies, they are making 3 to 4 times what they did just last year. What are they doing with those excess windfall profits? Lowering gasoline prices? No, they are doing stock buybacks. They ought to pay a tax on it.
Okay.
And I think there ought to be rebates to consumers.
Oh boy, that was painful. First of all, Lindsey Graham, you are good. You know how to put lipstick on a pig, and you did it perfectly. If I had a pig trying to I would have to ask you to do it. You spoke to the waitress. You spoke to everybody, and you showed them with misinformation how this new bill that is actually going to be good for a lot of folks, it's going to be bad. You were good. And all Rosenthal could speak about were things like, we are going to create the IRS to run across and find all those rich people that don't pay taxes. And the average American going to say, yeah, but those rich people have accountants that they're going to know not to do X, Y, Z. So it makes what Lindsey Graham says sound a little bit more true. Or, we're going to get your drug prices cut. And look, here is the deal. If you really wanted to challenge Lindsey Graham, let's look at some of the things Lindsey Graham said. He kept on saying, we are how to get us out of this recession. We are not in a recession. You cannot be in a recession with 500,000 jobs created in a month. That the GDP has dropped 2 months in a row. Those are technical reasons why it dropped. He should have challenged Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, would you prefer us to be in the upswing that Trump was in when we only had 100,000 people per month? Or do you prefer what we are giving Americans, over 500,000 new jobs per month? He should have challenged him. You notice when Blumenthal started, he said, thanks for having us in this bipartisan manner. And as soon as Lindsey Graham has to respond, he pats him on the back and he says, this is not going to be bipartisan. Like the child who looks like the person that can't defend you. Okay, now Lindsey talks about by allowing us to negotiate for drug prices, and by the way, it's only about 10 or 15 drugs they're negotiating. There are thousands of drugs, right? But they want you to believe that somehow they are going to be hurting the drug companies. Let's get something clear first. Drug companies do not take risk. They do not invent. Look at their balance sheet. Most of their profits don't go back reinvested into research. Their profits go to shareholders. Their profits go, or rather, their monies go to spend on advertising. They spend more on advertising and marketing than they do research and development. Does that tell you something? Or is that going to harm research? It makes absolutely no sense. And Blumenthal did not challenge that. Blumenthal should say, wait, Lindsey, remember, most of the drug research is done by the taxpayer dollars, and you always try to hold that back. You always try to hurt taxpayers. Remember, the private sector only takes a drug after it has been developed. Then Lindsey says, you remember COVID? COVID was, if it weren't for us, having the pharmaceutical companies well funded, we would not have solved COVID. false. We gave $2 billion to the companies to rush the output on COVID vaccines after we had paid universities and other entities the monies to research RNA or mRNA technology. You see, all these things immediately, once Lindsay talked about COVID, we should have said COVID was done through the government, not the pharmaceuticals. The pharmaceuticals completed the research funded by the government. Thank you so kindly. Thank you very much. But no, Blumenthal didn't say that, right? Then the 15% rate. Oh, if you charge them 50%, that company who would have bought expensed a factory. What they mean is expense and mean that when they build that factory, they could, instead of depreciating it over 30 years, they may have just expensed the entire factory. It's under certain limits, right? So that they could reduce their taxes. In other words, instead of spreading out that depreciation, and by the way, depreciation of tax is a tax scheme anyway, but instead of depreciating it over 30 years or something like that, to reduce their immediate taxes, they go ahead and they jam it all to say, we don't really owe taxes because we're expensing out that factory altogether. So they're saying, you charge them a minimum of 15%. These guys would not be able to do the trick, so they pay zero taxes. To which Blumenthal should have said, wait a minute, you mean these guys depend on the tax system to invest in a factory that's going to keep them viable? The reason why manufacturing of the microchips is done in Taiwan and not the United States is because of the gimmicks of these guys wanting to take the profits and not pay taxes? Is that what you're saying, Lindsey Graham? We are so terrible in confronting the stupidity of the right, the non-functionality of the policies. Right. Come on, folks. Look, their policies are the reason why we have deteriorating infrastructure. Their policies are the reason why our airports are some of the worst in the industrialized world. Their policies are the reason why we are sicker than any other industrialized country in the world. Their policies are the reason why we are the only country where you can actually go bankrupt because you get sick. Those are neoliberal. Those are supply side policies instituted by the other side. And we are apologetic when we attempt to do something right for humanity, our American humans. We are apologetic for that. Why do we have such a stick representing what it means to be an efficient person in supporting America? And IRS agents running after you? You mean you want there to be a bunch of tax cheats? Come on, folks. We need to learn how to speak, and it's evident that centrists, it's evident that moderates, it's evident that we need good spokespeople, educated, intelligent. And by the way, all these guys are, but they don't have what it takes to really inform Americans. Americans vote for Republicans because we have guys like Lindsey Graham who are very effective communicators. And we have Blumenthal who has better policies. Not that he's the best. I mean, he's sort of a moderate guy. Guys like Blumenthal who has no notion of how to connect with the average American citizen and say, hey, those taxes that you are paying, that they're not paying, you are paying indirectly in some form. We have got to do it. So look, bottom line is this. The Blumenthals of the world are not going to get the job done. All these guys are not going to get the job. It is your job to actually articulate what we're talking about here to your neighbors, your brothers, your sisters, your friends, your enemies, and everybody else, because it is clear there won't be a centrist or moderate Democrat who will be on TV articulating next to a Republican and let them have it for the havoc they've caused in this country. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.